Hello, I'm Alex Zane, and welcome to this week's edition of Movie Dose here on Cinema Surgery, where we round up all the most exciting stories doing the rounds in movie land at the moment. On this week's episode, retirement? No siree. The Oscar-winning actor who claimed he was quitting the business has now said no. That is not only not the case, but he's announced not one, but two movies coming out in his franchise. As well as that, we've got the latest intel on the Invisible Man director Leigh Whannell's upcoming werewolf horror, Wolfman, due out in 2025, and it's intriguing to say the least. Plus, it really is time for Ludicrous Speed. Go! Yeah, the sequel we were promised back in 1987 has finally gone into production. All that plus the action movie I am most looking forward to in 2025. And no, it is not the John Wick spin-off, Ballerina. That's all to come on this week's episode of Movie Dose. And as always, if you have any thoughts on the stories we cover, please let us know them in the comments below. And if you like this video, do hit like and please subscribe so we can keep making more of them. Thank you in advance. Right then, he has been causing all sorts of buzz with his performance in Gladiator 2, a movie I have seen and indeed love. And yes, he is the best thing in it. Denzel Washington's Gladiator owner, Marcus, is just a magnificent performance. The second time in his career he has played a villain after Training Day, and he is brilliant. But in amongst all of that, on the huge promotional tour for that movie, came the announcement from the man himself that he is planning on quitting acting. He is planning on retiring. Now, he did say he has a couple of movies that he's going to complete before that happens. One of those, despite not yet being announced by Marvel themselves, is an appearance in Ryan Coogler's Black Panther 3 for a role that he is specifically writing for Denzel Washington. The other is confirmed, and that is Netflix's historical epic Hannibal, where he reteams with his longtime collaborator Antoine Fuqua for a historical epic in which he plays the Carthaginian general Hannibal, famously described as one of the greatest military tacticians in history. He crossed the Alps on elephants to take on the Romans, which any of the Izzard fans will remember is one of his great jokes. He's crossing the Alps on elephants. Do you mean he's crossing the Alps and he's in his element? Anyway, those are the two movies he's confirmed. Plus, he said he may be doing some Shakespeare. But now, fast forward to the current day, and apparently, no, he is not retiring. This is what he actually said. I didn't say I was going into retirement. I said that it has to be a level of interest for me. I'm more interested in getting behind the camera, so that's about 5 years out. I may have used the word retire, but I look at life in three sections. You learn, you earn, and you return. I'm in the return part of life. Okay, so that could be that he's not retiring from the industry, but he's retiring from acting to focus on simply working behind the camera going forward. It shouldn't be the first time. He's directed 4 movies over his career as Denzel Washington, including Antoine Fisher, and obviously the Oscar-nominated Fences, which picked up an Oscar for Viola Davis's wonderful performance in it. So could that be the case? Could it have been misconstrued that actually he's just retiring from acting, but not retiring from the industry? No is the answer, because he recently did an interview with Esquire magazine where he announced that he was going to be doing not 1, but 2 more movies in the Equalizer franchise, Equalizer 4 and Equalizer 5. Now, that doesn't come as a huge surprise, financially speaking. The first 3 movies raked in approximately $400 million at the box office. So statistically, it makes sense to make 2 more movies. Who it may come as a surprise to is the picture house behind it, Sony, who have never mentioned the idea of making 2 more Equalizer movies, and indeed his director Antoine Fuqua, who helmed the first 3 movies, who has not made any mention of an Equalizer 4 or Equalizer 5, and indeed Equalizer 3 felt like something of a swan song for Robert McCall, Washington's character. He did seem to retire at the end of that movie. But look, if Denzel Washington says Equalizer 4 and 5 are happening, who are we to disagree? Personally, the idea of an Equalizer 4 and 5 I find very, very exciting. I actually had the pleasure of spending some time on the set of Equalizer 2 in a very cold Boston, where I got to interview Denzel Washington and Antoine Fuqua. Now, granted, Equalizer 2 is definitely the worst of the trilogy, but that first movie is wonderful. That corkscrew scene, magical. And the final showdown in the warehouse, I absolutely loved it. And that third movie set in southern Italy, great. Again, it felt like a send-off for Robert McCall. But look, as a character, Robert McCall, Denzel Washington, it's perfect casting. He's wonderful in the role as a man who really doesn't want to have to do what he's going to have to do unless you just won't back down. And then, he's going to do it. So 4 and 5, excellent. This, though, is the reason Denzel Washington himself told Esquire magazine when he announced 4 and 5 for his reason for doing it. I told them I would do another Equalizer. And we're doing 4 and 5. More people are happy about that. People love those doggone Equalizers. But I've come to realize that the Equalizer films are for me too, because they're for the people. They want me to go out there and get the bad guys. We can't get them, so you go get them. And I say, okay, I'll get them. Just wait right there. I'll be right back. I mean, I love that quote, largely because it's very similar to a quote that Denzel told me personally. Now, I had the privilege of sitting down with Denzel in New York in 2018 to watch through some of his most iconic scenes on the big screen with him, including that famous corkscrew scene from the first Equalizer film. And this is that moment from 2018.
The scene, I think, that is forever going to be known in
With the Russians? With the guys? No. That one. Yeah, I figured.
Yeah. I call it that corkscrew scene.
Yes, the corkscrew.
This corkscrew scene.
That was terrible. That was terrible.
I'm going to play it. This is what Robert McCall can do. And it's
there you go.
an incredible action sequence.
Wow.
What do you think it is about, like, a scene like this that just connects with, like, an audience?
Maybe that's how they feel. And they want to see the bad. You know who the bad guy is. You know why he's bad, and you want to do something about it. And I'm the man for the job.
So bottom line, as a film fan, I love watching Denzel Washington on screen. And as a film journalist, I love interviewing him. He is a no-nonsense, straight talking actor, and I really enjoy that from him. For example, that clip of the interview you just saw when I sat down with him in New York, that was after I'd met him on the set of The Equalizer 2 in Boston. And there's a little bit of preamble, a little bit of warm-up chat before we started filming. I went over to him and I was like, "Hi, Denzel, really looking forward to the interview. You probably remember we met in Boston on the set of Equalizer 2. And he looked at me and he went, "Nope." That was nerve-wracking. As it turned out, he was wonderful. Once we started the interview, it's one of the greatest interviews of my career, personally speaking. Not for him. I can't say it for him. But for me, I really, really enjoyed it. Either way, it was a wonderful moment, and I want more Equalizer movies, and I want to be able to carry on interviewing Denzel into the future. So good. Equalizer 4 and 5. On the way? Question mark? Okay, next up today. Do you remember The Dark Universe? Now, this was Universal Studios' planned shared universe featuring all their monsters. It was going to be big, and that's big with a capital B. I'm sure you remember that famous photograph of all this incredible talent lined up, joining the Dark Universe. We had Javier Bardem, who was due to play Frankenstein's monster. We had Johnny Depp, who was due to play the Invisible Man. Sophia Boutella, who was due to play the Mummy. Russell Crowe, who was due to play Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And of course, the great Tom Cruise, who was due to play Van Helsing. It was an amazing photo. It set the stall out for the Dark Universe. And then 2017 happened. The Mummy didn't do well. And the whole thing was canned. Just done. 10 planned movies, all cancelled. However, there was an upside to that. Universal decided upon a much more stripped back approach to its monsters. So in 2020, we got the Jason Blum produced, Lee Whannell directed The Invisible Man. No Johnny Depp in this, but a wonderful Elizabeth Moss being terrorized by her invisible ex. Now, the movie was a huge hit. Only cost $7 million, made over $145 million worldwide just before the pandemic hit, and then it went to streaming. Could have possibly made even more. And now Lee Whannell is returning to the Universal Monsters universe because on January the 17th, 2025, we get Wolfman. Now, he's just recently been talking about some of the inspiration he's taken for Wolfman. And as I said at the start, it's very, very intriguing. But before I tell you about that, let me remind you of what the plot of Wolfman is. A father called Blake inherits his childhood home in rural Oregon after his father's disappearance. With his marriage to wife Charlotte on the rocks, he persuades her to visit the remote property with their daughter. Upon arrival, the family is attacked by a mysterious creature and take refuge inside. As the night unfolds, Blake starts behaving strangely and Charlotte must face the terrifying possibility that the real danger might be within their home. So when I first heard that synopsis, I didn't actually think that much about the idea of a family being trapped in a home, a monster being trapped in a home with them, until Lee Whannell did an Empire interview this week, Empire magazine, and had a very interesting thing to say about the source of his inspiration for Wolfman. And his source comes from an amazing horror in which the protagonist spends a large portion of the movie trapped in his apartment, transforming into something else. And that movie is David Cronenberg's incredible 1986 horror, The Fly, in which Jeff Goldblum slowly transforms into a human fly, or Brundlefly, as he's called in the film. This is what Whannell actually said about the relationship between Wolfman and the Fly. What The Fly did that a lot of other practical effects-driven horror movies from that time did not do was bring the tragedy out of these practical effects. It wasn't a joke in The Fly. It was there to illustrate someone who was dying of an illness. I was like, I've got to do that. It's not about being funny or icky or gory. This is about the tragedy of the human body falling apart. Now, that will resonate with anyone who's seen The Fly, because as well as the incredible body horror that we know David Cronenberg for, the emotion in The Fly, especially that ending and what Gina Davis's character has to do to her former partner, I mean, that is a powerful moment. That is one of horror cinema's great gut punch moments of emotion. And if Whannell can capture even a smattering of that, then Wolfman could be something very, very special. And yes, look, I know these are just words at the moment, and I hear the name Cronenberg and I get very, very excited. I watched a lot of his movies at too young, like Shivers and Videodrome, and of course The Fly. And indeed, it was the comparisons to Cronenberg that set me on my way to watch The Substance, which turned out to be one of my favorite movies of 2025. We'll do that list properly towards the end of the year. But as well as talking up his inspiration for the movie coming from The Fly, Whannell was also talking up Julia Garner's performance as Charlotte, the wife, trapped in the house with her husband. And this is what he had to say about her performance. She's the emotional compass of this film, and she's going to be what Shelley Duvall was in The Shining. You don't get scared in The Shining without Shelley Duvall. The Fly? The Shining? I mean, these are big reference points, big movies to reference. But look, The Invisible Man was great. If Leigh Whannell can bring the same level of tension, horror, emotion to Wolfman, then the 17th of January 2025, mark your calendars, could be a very special day for horror cinema. Okay, let's move on. Now, may the Schwartz be with you. Of all the Mel Brooks spoofs, if you're of a certain age, like me, sure, Blazing Saddles is an amazing film. Yes, Young Frankenstein is genius, but there was one movie that meant the most to us. We were the Star Wars generation, and the movie, the spoof from Mel Brooks that was right here was 1987's Spaceballs. That was our movie. So, Spaceballs starred the great Rick Moranis as the Darth Vader-like Dark Helmet. We had Bill Pullman in the Han Solo-like role of Lone Star. We had John Candy playing the Chewie-inspired Barf, Puke, whatever. And also, we had, I'm just going to fill this section with quotes from Spaceballs. And we also had the great Mel Brooks himself playing Yogurt, obviously inspired by Yoda. Now, look, I love this movie because not only did it send up Star Wars brilliantly, but it was full of so many memorable quotes. When will then be now? Soon. Ludicrous speed. Go. It's Mega Maid. She's gone from suck to blow. I'm going to stop doing quotes and tell you a bit about how not everyone loved this movie, because not everyone did love this movie. It has 52% on Rotten Tomatoes. It didn't exactly set the box office alight. Cost in the region of $25 million, made $38 million. But now we have Spaceballs 2 in production. So it was only a couple of weeks ago, word went out that there was this script doing the rounds in Hollywood that was co-written by Josh Gad. Now, Josh Gad, obviously, we know from his work in Murder on the Orient Express. Anyway, in the first movie, Mel Brooks's character, Yogurt, says the line to our heroes, "Don't worry, we'll all meet again." In Spaceballs 2, the search for more money. And now here we sit in 2024, and Spaceballs 2 is actually happening. So to set the scene, it was only recently that there was talk of this script doing the rounds, co-written by Josh Gad, that everyone who read it said was brilliant, but had yet to find a home. No one was willing to produce it. Well, here we sit only a couple of weeks later, and Amazon Studios has announced that Spaceballs 2 has gone into production. This is what we know so far. A very little. The only cast member who's been confirmed is the co-writer himself, Josh Gad, who we know from his work in the live-action Beauty and the Beast, Murder on the Orient Express, and most famously voicing Olaf the Snowman in the Frozen movies. Like I said, we don't know who he's playing, but Josh Gad is in the movie. Aside from that, we know that Mel Brooks, who's now 98, isn't directing this film. Directing duties fall to Josh Greenbaum. Now, he made 2021's excellent Barb and Ma Go to Vista Del Mar. He also has directed this year the wonderful documentary Will and Harper, in which Will Ferrell and Harper Steele, his friend who recently underwent gender transition, take a road trip across America. And in 2023, he directed a movie that didn't set the box office alight, but I personally loved, the dog comedy Strayed. So Josh Greenbaum in the director's chair. Mel Brooks himself, while not directing, is producing the movie. He said of the script, everyone who has read it has been blown away. No word as yet as to whether he'll be reprising his role as Yogurt or his other role in the original Spaceballs as President Scroob. What's the code? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the code an idiot would have on their luggage. 12345. That's the code I have on my luggage. Last Spaceballs quote, I promise. Now, of course, Rick Moranis has retired from acting, so it seems really unlikely that he will reprise his role as Dark Helmet, which is obviously disappointing. But the promising thing is there is quite a lot of Star Wars material out there in the world right now, which means there is plenty for Spaceballs 2 to parody. And in fact, the only deal breaker for me is if it's not called Spaceballs 2, The Search for More Money. And I say that being fully aware Spaceballs 2, The Schwartz Awakens is a very good title, but Spaceballs 2, The Search for More Money, or I'm not watching it. And just a quick one to end on, there are some big action movies heading our way in 2025. For a start, on the 6th of June, we get Ballerina, set in the John Wick universe and starring Ana de Armas in the lead. Now, there were rumors around this movie that it had been reshot in a major way, with Chad Stahelski, the director of the John Wick films, actually replacing director Len Wiseman for the reshoots. Only recently, that has been poo-pooed by sources on the inside who say, no. Chad Stahelski was there to consult, but Len Wiseman himself definitely directed the reshoot. So that's Ballerina, that's coming out on the 6th of June. Before that, on the 23rd of May, we have Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, which may well be the final outing for Tom Cruise's Ethan Hunt. Obviously, it's had its name changed from Dead Reckoning Part 2 to The Final Reckoning, which not only suggests it could be the final outing for Ethan Hunt, but is also kind of a smart move. Now, I loved Dead Reckoning Part 1. I thought it was phenomenal. It didn't do the numbers that it was expected to do. So changing the title of this sequel from Dead Reckoning Part 2 to The Final Reckoning is, to my mind, a very smart move. On the simplest level, if you're a moviegoer who didn't see Part 1, then you see Dead Reckoning Part 2 being advertised, you may well go, yeah, I didn't see Part 1, so I'll give this one a miss. Whereas The Final Reckoning is like, it's the last time I'm going to see Tom Cruise do something insane with a plane. I'm in. So that's 2. However, the movie I am most looking forward to in the action genre in 2025 isn't either of those. The action movie I am most looking forward to in 2025 is Netflix's Havoc. Okay, so if this is the first you're hearing of Havoc, it is a movie that stars Tom Hardy. That's already a big bonus for me. It's a balls-to-the-wall action movie starring Tom Hardy, a man who I love watching on screen. And I will say at this stage, I'm not going to go into the argument about a balls-to-the-wall action movie being on Netflix, not being able to see it on the big screen. It's a big conversation. It's not for right now. Nevertheless, it's Tom Hardy in a balls-to-the-wall action movie, which I'm already here for. It's the fact that to make this movie, he has collaborated with director Gareth Evans, which is the icing on the proverbial action cake. Because along with 2 of the people I just mentioned, in fact, Chad Stahelski and Chris McQuarrie, who directs the Mission Impossible movies, or at least the most recent installments, Gareth Evans is one of the most exciting action directors working today. Anyone who has seen 2011's Indonesian action movie, The Raid, will know exactly what I'm talking about. Add to that, Season 1, Episode 5 of his Sky series, Gangs of London. That farmhouse siege is one of the greatest pieces of action television I have ever seen. So yes, it's exciting. Gareth Evans and Tom Hardy. Now, granted, this movie actually initially wrapped shooting in 2021, and here we are in 2024. Now, the delay has been for additional photography, which, yes, immediately makes you feel nervous, like, oh, why? Now, apparently, it wasn't to correct anything about the film. It wasn't like, God, this isn't working. It was simply because they wanted to add some extra stuff in, and arranging the schedules of everyone involved proved difficult. I'm willing to believe that. And also, this is what Gareth Evans said about the additional shooting and the additional time he's been given on Havoc to Empire magazine. It allowed me to better streamline the film and make it what it was always intended to be, which is a blistering, fast-paced action thriller with nods to the Hong Kong cinema that I grew up watching. And if you want to know a bit about what this blistering, action-packed thriller is about, here is what Evans says the plot is. Hardy plays Walker, a cop tasked with rescuing the nephew of Forrest Whitaker's mayor. He's basically on cleanup duty, and he has to navigate this broken city in order to get to him first. That's the propulsive mission he goes on, and because it's me, it doesn't go well for a long time. So that is my action movie to beat in 2025. The Gareth Evans directed, Tom Hardy starring Havoc on Netflix, as yet an unspecified release date. But what do you think? Is that the action movie you're most excited about? Or what do you think of any of the stories we covered this week? Equalizer 4 and 5, a good thing or a bad thing? Are you excited about the comparisons Leigh Whannell is making between the Wolfman and the Fly? Are you excited about the Wolfman? Is Spaceballs 2 a good idea? Any of those stories, hit us up in the comments below. We would love to know your thoughts. And as I said at the start, please do like this video if you liked it and subscribe for more. That is all from us this week on Movie Dose. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.